Hello, my name is Ethan Ross. I'm 37, a single dad, and on most Saturdays I'm just trying to make it to Monday without anything catching fire. That morning, though, I was standing outside St. Matthew's Cathedral in Manhattan. Black tie too tight, shoes shined for once, waiting to drive a bride and groom I'd never met to a reception I'd never be invited to. The job paid triple because it was a Saturday wedding in peak season, and Chloe needed new boots before the first snow. I leaned against the Lincoln Town Car, arms folded, watching guests in pastel suits and hats the size of satellite dishes file into the church. The air smelled like hairspray and lilies. I was early, as always. Being early was the only control I still had in life. Then I heard it, a sound that didn't belong among the string quartet and champagne laughter. A choked, broken sob coming from the side door that led to the bride's room. I glanced around. No one else seemed to notice. Another sob, louder, followed by something hitting the floor hard. Instinct kicked in before common sense could stop me. 6 years out of the army, and I still move toward crying the way other people move away from it. I walked to the half-open door and knocked once, light. Everything okay in there? Silence. Then the door cracked wider. I don't know what I expected, maybe a bridesmaid with a ripped hem, but it wasn't this. A woman in a blinding white wedding dress, cathedral train pooled around her like spilled milk, mascara running in two perfect black rivers down her cheeks. Her phone was clutched so tight, I thought the screen would shatter. She looked at me for 3 full seconds, eyes wild, lips trembling, and then she whispered the words that changed everything. "Get me out of here, right now, please!" I should have asked questions. I should have said I was just the driver. Instead, I heard myself answer, "Yes, ma'am." She didn't grab a bag. She didn't look back. She stepped out of the room, veil trailing behind her like a surrender flag, and followed me down the narrow service corridor I'd used for smoke breaks 10 minutes earlier. The cathedral organ was swelling inside, about to start the processional. Somewhere beyond those walls, 300 people were standing up for a bride who was already gone. We moved fast. My shoes echoed on the stone floor. Her heels clicked once, twice. Then she kicked them off without breaking stride and left them in the hallway like evidence. I pushed open the side exit. Sunlight hit us hard. The Lincoln sat 30 feet away, engine still warm. I opened the back door out of habit. She shook her head. "Front. I don't want to be cargo today." I closed the back door, opened the passenger side. She slid in, dress and all, the silk swallowing half the seat. I shut the door, rounded the car, got behind the wheel, and pulled away from the curb before my brain caught up with my body. In the rearview mirror, I saw the first confused guest step out the main doors, looking around for the bride who was supposed to appear any second. Someone shouted her name, "Juliet." Then another voice joined in. By the time we hit the corner, the sidewalk was filling with people staring after a black town car that had no business leaving without the newlyweds. She was shaking. Not delicate little shivers, full-body tremors. I reached over, tugged my suit jacket off, and draped it across her shoulders without asking. She pulled it tight, like a blanket. "Where to?" I asked, voice steadier than I felt. "Anywhere but here," she said, barely above a whisper. I took the next left, then another, weaving through midtown traffic until the cathedral was out of sight. Only then did I risk a longer glance. The mascara had stopped halfway down her cheeks, leaving pale tracks through the makeup. Her hands were clenched in her lap, knuckles white, phone still gripped like a lifeline. "You want to tell me what just happened back there?" I asked. She laughed once, sharp and bitter. "I just found out my fiancé has been sleeping with my maid of honor for 2 years. He sent the text apology while I was putting on the veil." She turned the phone so I could see the screen. "I'm sorry, Juliet. I love her. I never meant for you to find out this way." The message was time-stamped 4 minutes ago. I let out a slow breath. "Jesus." "Yeah," she said. "Jesus isn't taking my calls today." We hit a red light. A group of tourists crossed in front of us, laughing, taking selfies. Normal life, 10 feet away. Inside the car, it felt like we were underwater. I made a decision right then. I didn't know her name yet, didn't know anything, except that she was bleeding in a wedding dress and I was the only one around. I turned north instead of south. "I know a place," I said. "Quiet, no questions, at least until you stop shaking." She didn't argue, just leaned her head against the window and closed her eyes. 20 minutes later, we were over the bridge, Manhattan shrinking behind us, Brooklyn bound, my street, my house, my daughter who was at a friend's birthday party until 6. I had no idea what I was doing. I only knew I couldn't leave her on some corner in a wedding dress with nowhere to go. The light turned green. I pressed the gas. And just like that, the day the bride ran away became the day I stopped running from everything else. We pulled into my driveway just after 4:30. The street was quiet, maple leaves skittering across the asphalt, the kind of late October afternoon that still smells like cut grass and distant fireplaces. My house looked smaller than usual, a narrow 2-story row home with peeling blue paint and a porch light that flickers when it's cold. I killed the engine and sat there a second, keys still in my hand. "You sure about this?" she asked, voice raw. "I can get a hotel." "You try booking a hotel in a wedding dress on a Saturday with half of Manhattan looking for you," I said. "Besides, Chloe's at a sleepover birthday thing until tomorrow morning. We've got the place to ourselves." She gave a tired nod and climbed out. The dress swallowed the sidewalk. I grabbed the train so she wouldn't trip and led her up the steps. Inside smelled like coffee and the cinnamon candle Chloe insists on burning, even though it makes me sneeze. I closed the door behind us and locked it, something I rarely do before dark. She stood in the middle of my living room, like she'd landed on another planet. Veil gone somewhere on the bridge, hair falling out of whatever pins had survived the escape, mascara now dried into little commas under her eyes. My jacket still hung off her shoulders over $100,000 worth of silk and lace. "Bathroom's down the hall if you want to," I started. "I don't even know your name," she cut in. Ethan Ross." "Juliet Monroe," she said, then added, almost like an apology. "The one on every gossip site right now." I shrugged. "I don't read gossip sites." She looked around again, taking in the scuffed hardwood, the photos of Chloe on every wall, the Xbox controller on the coffee table, the half-finished Lego Millennium Falcon Chloe swore she'd complete before Christmas. "This is real," she murmured. "Yeah," I said. "Real's about all I've got." She laughed once, small and cracked, then pressed her palms to her eyes like she could push the day back inside. I left her there and went to the kitchen, filled the kettle, found the one clean mug that wasn't covered in cartoon characters. When I came back, she was sitting on the edge of the couch, elbows on knees, staring at the floor. "Tea, coffee, something stronger?" I asked. "Something stronger." I poured 2 fingers of the cheap bourbon I keep above the fridge for nights when the quiet gets too loud. She took it without a word and knocked it back like water. I refilled without asking. We sat in silence for a minute, maybe 2. The house creaked around us the way old houses do when they're settling. "I was a firefighter," I said finally. "Army rescue swimmer before that. Spent 10 years running into things other people run away from. Quit the day they handed me my wife's wedding ring in a plastic bag." She looked up. I kept going. "Sarah died in the 2019 flood. She was volunteering with a church group, delivering supplies upstate. Bridge collapsed. They found her 2 days later tangled in a tree 50 yards downstream. I was in Kandahar when it happened. By the time I got home, Chloe was 6 and asking why Mommy was sleeping under the ground." Juliet's eyes softened, the CEO mask nowhere in sight. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "Me too." I took a sip of my own bourbon. After that, I just drove. Nights, mostly. Weddings, proms, funerals. Anything that keeps me moving so I don't have to sit still and remember. She nodded slowly, like she understood stillness and memory better than she wanted to. "My turn, I guess," she said. "Built a company from nothing, cybersecurity, sold my first patent at 26, was on the Forbes list by 30. Everyone thinks that's the dream. Turns out the dream comes with a mother who still introduces me as my daughter, the one who isn't married yet, and a fiancé who was sleeping with my best friend since Yale." She laughed again, bitter this time. 2 years, Ethan. 2 years of picking venues and tasting cakes while he was picking her up from the airport every time I was out of town. The kettle whistled. I got up, made her tea anyway, because bourbon on an empty stomach is a bad idea when your whole life just detonated. She wrapped both hands around the mug like it was the only warm thing left in the world. Headlights swept across the window, my neighbor Mrs. Alvarez coming home from bingo. Normal life, still happening outside these walls. Juliet looked suddenly panicked. "If anyone sees me..." "No one's looking here," I said. "Brooklyn's big, And nobody expects Juliet Monroe to hide in a house with plastic dinosaurs on the fridge. She glanced at the fridge, Chloe's T-Rex magnet holding up a school photo, and the corner of her mouth twitched. Almost a smile. I showed her the guest room, Chloe's playroom that has a futon nobody ever uses. Dug out an old army t-shirt and a pair of sweatpants that would swallow her twice. Shower's through there. Towels are clean. Take whatever you need. She stood in the doorway, swimming in my clothes already, looking smaller than any CEO had a right to. "Ethan," she said quietly, "why are you doing this?" I thought about it, really thought. "Because 6 years ago nobody came for me when I needed it," I said, "and because you asked." She studied my face for a long moment, then nodded once and closed the door. I stood in the hallway a long time after the water started running, listening to a stranger cry in my shower, wearing my dead wife's favorite college t-shirt, while the woman who was supposed to be on her honeymoon slept under my roof in a dress that cost more than my car. Somewhere around 2 a.m, I found myself in the kitchen heating up leftover spaghetti, because grief and bourbon make you hungry in the strangest ways. The bathroom door creaked open, bare feet on hardwood. Juliet appeared in the doorway, hair damp, face scrubbed clean, looking 19 instead of 34. "Smells good," she said. I handed her a bowl without a word. We ate standing at the counter, passing the Parmesan back and forth like we'd done this 100 times. When she finished, she set the bowl in the sink and leaned back against the counter, arms wrapped around herself. "Thank you," she said, "for tonight, for everything." "Don't thank me yet," I told her. "Morning's coming, and mornings have a way of making everything real again." She looked at me then, really looked, and for the first time since she'd opened that door in a wedding dress, her eyes weren't afraid. "Maybe," she said softly. "Real is exactly what I need." I didn't sleep much after that. Lay on the couch, staring at the ceiling, listening to the house breathe around a woman who wasn't supposed to be here, wondering how one yes could turn a whole life sideways. Outside, Brooklyn kept moving. Inside, everything had already stopped. The first 3 days passed like a dream neither of us wanted to wake from. Juliet never left the house. I brought her burner phones, sweatshirts, and every grocery item that didn't require ID. The news cycle exploded. Billionaire bride vanishes, wedding of the year ends in chaos. Her face was on every channel, every phone, every bodega television between here and Manhattan. But inside my little Blue Row home, she was just Juliet, barefoot, hair in a messy bun, stealing Chloe's colored pencils to sketch on the back of my electric bills. Chloe came home Sunday evening and took one look at the woman in her dad's army hoodie eating cereal straight from the box and announced, "You're the princess from TV!" Then, without missing a beat, she asked if Juliet wanted to finish the 1,000-piece Frozen puzzle spread across the dining table. Juliet glanced at me, eyes wide. I shrugged. 10 minutes later, they were on the floor together, Chloe explaining why Olaf needed a nose made of carrot, Juliet laughing so hard she had to wipe her eyes with the sleeve of my hoodie. That sound, her real laugh, hit me somewhere behind the ribs I'd kept locked for 6 years. By Tuesday, she was cooking, real cooking. She took over my kitchen like she'd always belonged there, sleeves rolled up, flour on her cheek, turning ground beef and whatever was in my fridge into a bolognese that made Chloe declare it better than restaurant stars. We ate at the table instead of in front of the TV. Chloe talked nonstop about school, about how Emily in 4th grade said Juliet was probably kidnapped, and Juliet listened like every word mattered. When Chloe asked why the princess wasn't wearing her crown anymore, Juliet answered, "Because crowns get heavy." And I swear my daughter nodded like she understood. Nights were different. After Chloe went to bed, Juliet and I sat on opposite ends of the couch, feet almost touching, trading pieces of ourselves we'd never told anyone else. She talked about boardrooms where men twice her age called her sweetheart until she bought their companies out from under them. I told her about swimming through black water in the Persian Gulf pulling pilots from sunken helicopters, about the night I carried Sarah's casket and how the weight of it still lived in my shoulders. We didn't flirt. We just unloaded, like two people who'd been carrying too much for too long and finally found a place to set it down. Wednesday night the rain came hard, drumming the tin awning over the back porch. Chloe was asleep. Juliet stood at the kitchen window watching water stream down the glass, arms wrapped around herself. "I keep waiting to feel something," she said quietly. "Anger, humiliation, anything. But mostly I feel light, like I've been living in a house with no windows and someone finally kicked the door open." I was drying dishes, trying not to stare at the way my old t-shirt slipped off one of her shoulders. "Light's good," I managed. She turned. "Is it crazy that I don't want to leave?" My heart slammed once hard. "You'll have to eventually." "I know." She took a step closer. "But not tonight." Thunder rolled. The kitchen bulb flickered. And then we weren't on opposite ends of anything anymore. She was right there, close enough that I could smell rain on her skin and the faint trace of my own soap. Her hand found the scar on my forearm, the one I got pulling a kid out of a burning SUV 3 lifetimes ago, and she traced it like she was reading Braille. "Ethan," she whispered. And it wasn't a question. I kissed her like a man who'd forgotten he was allowed to want something. She kissed me back, like a woman who just remembered she was allowed to feel anything at all. We didn't make it to the couch. We barely made it to the hallway, hands fumbling, breaths ragged, 6 years of loneliness and 1 week of pretending we were only hiding her crashing together against the wall outside Chloe's bedroom door. Afterward, we lay on the living room rug, city lights striping the ceiling through half-open blinds, her head on my chest, my fingers tangled in her hair. Neither of us spoke for a long time. "I've never done this," she said finally. "Sex on a rug that desperately needs vacuuming?" She laughed, soft. "Let myself need someone, not for a merger, not for optics, just need." I pressed my lips to her temple. "Welcome to the club." Thursday the storm broke, and the temperature dropped 10 degrees. Chloe begged Juliet to stay one more night. "Just until the puzzle's done." Juliet looked at me over my daughter's head, eyes asking permission I had no right to give. I nodded anyway. That afternoon, we took Chloe to the park, hoodies up, baseball caps low, 3 fugitives pretending to be a normal family. Chloe ran ahead chasing pigeons. Juliet slipped her hand into mine like it was the most natural thing in the world. I felt the weight of it all the way to my bones, how easy this was, how dangerous, how right. Friday morning, everything cracked open. I was making coffee when my phone buzzed with a news alert: Juliet Monroe spotted in Brooklyn. A blurry photo taken from across the street showed Juliet and Chloe on the park swings yesterday, my daughter's laughter frozen mid-frame. Within an hour, there were news vans 2 blocks over. A helicopter thumped overhead. My phone started blowing up, first from the limo company, then from numbers I didn't recognize. Juliet stood at the window watching the circus gather, arms wrapped tight around herself again. "They found me," she said. I came up behind her, rested my hands on her shoulders. "We knew this was coming." She turned, eyes glassy but steady. "I have to go back. The company's stock is tanking. People's jobs, I know. And I won't let them drag you and Chloe into this." I wanted to argue. Wanted to say, screw the company, screw the cameras, stay here where it's real. But I saw the set of her jaw and recognized it. The same look I used to wear before jumping into floodwaters. She'd made her choice. That night, she packed the few things she'd collected: my hoodie, Chloe's colored pencils, the half-finished puzzle we never quite managed to complete. Chloe cried into her pillow until she fell asleep. Juliet sat on the edge of my bed, the same place we'd barely left for days, and wrote the letter I wouldn't find until morning. I walked her to the door at 3 a.m. No cameras yet, just the 2 of us on the porch, breath fogging in the cold. She touched my face once, thumb brushing the stubble along my jaw. "You gave me back something I didn't know I'd lost." I couldn't speak. Just pulled her against me one last time, memorizing the way she fit, the way she smelled like my soap and her own skin and everything I wasn't ready to lose. Then she walked down the steps, got into the rideshare I'd called, and disappeared into the dark. The house went still. Too still. I stood there long after the taillights vanished, hands in my pockets, feeling the exact weight of what we'd found and what I'd just let go. I didn't sleep. How could I? The house felt hollowed out, like someone had scooped everything warm and alive from the walls and left only echoes. I sat at the kitchen table with her letter in front of me, the one she'd written in neat, slanted handwriting on the back of Chloe's drawing paper, the side without the crayon unicorn. Ethan, you once told me you spent years running into burning buildings because someone had to. Today I realized I've spent my whole life running away from them. You and Chloe didn't just hide me. You reminded me what it feels like to stand still and not be afraid. I have to go finish what I started, not for the company, not for the headlines, but for the woman I want to become when this is over. If you ever want to find me, I'll be at the place where no one is chasing us anymore. Thank you for giving me the courage to stop running. Juliet. I read it maybe 50 times before Chloe patted in at 6, hair wild, eyes swollen. Where's Juliet? She had to go, kiddo. Chloe stared at the empty chair where Juliet always sat, then at the half-eaten bowl of cereal Juliet had left for her with a smiley face made of blueberries. My daughter didn't cry again. She just climbed into my lap, pressed her face into my neck, and whispered she promised she'd come back for the puzzle. The next 48 hours were a blur of noise. Reporters camped on the corner. Someone flew a drone over the backyard. My phone rang off the hook. The limo company firing me. Old army buddies asking if I'd lost my mind. My mother leaving voicemails that started with, "Ethan James Ross, explain yourself." I unplugged the landline, turned the phone face down, and took Chloe to school wearing sunglasses like we were the criminals. Every channel replayed the same footage. Juliet's empty altar, the groom looking like he'd been punched in the soul, her mother crying to cameras about a nervous breakdown. They never mentioned the text messages, or they never mentioned the truth. By the third day, the vans thinned out. Brooklyn moved on. People always do. I went back to driving nights for a different company that didn't ask questions. Chloe stopped asking when Juliet was coming back and started asking if we could finish the puzzle ourselves. I told her puzzles sometimes stay unfinished. She looked at me like I'd failed a test. 2 weeks crawled by. The city forgot the runaway bride. Stock and Monroe Innovations stabilized after an emergency board statement. Life tried to slide back into its old shape, but nothing fit anymore. My house smelled faintly of the vanilla candle Juliet had bought at the corner bodega. Chloe's drawings now had 3 stick figures instead of 2. I caught myself reaching for 2 coffee mugs instead of 1. Then, on a Thursday that felt like any other, my phone lit up with a calendar alert I didn't remember setting. Juliet Monroe Foundation launch, 4 p.m. Shopaki PS 118, Brooklyn. I stared at the screen until the letters blurred. Chloe's school was 3 blocks from PS 118. She had an early dismissal that day. I picked her up at noon. She took one look at my face and asked, "Are we going to get her?" "Yeah," I said. "We're going to get her." We stopped at home first. I showered, put on the only clean button-down I owned, the one I hadn't worn since Sarah's funeral. Chloe changed into the blue dress she saves for school pictures. In the kitchen, I opened the small wooden box I'd kept on the highest shelf since the night Juliet left. Inside was the ring I'd made the day after she disappeared. Simple cord rope braided with a strand of Chloe's hair and a piece of dried beach grass from the jar on the porch. Nothing expensive, nothing that could be mistaken for charity or pity. At 3:30 we were in the car, Chloe clutching the unfinished frozen puzzle like a shield. Traffic was a nightmare, but we made it to the old school with 10 minutes to spare. The parking lot was packed with news vans again, but softer this time. No screaming headlines, just cameras and curious neighbors. Inside, the auditorium had been transformed. Banners read, "Monroe Foundation, Skills, Strength, Second Chances." Women of every age filled the seats. On stage stood Juliet, no makeup, hair in a simple ponytail, wearing jeans and a blazer. She looked like the woman who'd eaten cereal from the box in my kitchen, only now she was speaking to a room of 200 people about building a life that belongs to you and no one else. Chloe tugged my hand. "There she is." We slipped into the back row. Juliet was mid-sentence when her eyes swept the crowd and stopped on us. For a second, the entire room disappeared. She faltered just half a beat, then kept talking, but her voice cracked on the next word. When she finished, the room erupted. Cameras flashed, people rushed the stage with questions. Chloe didn't wait. She broke free and ran straight down the aisle, blue dress flying, puzzle box clutched to her chest. I followed slower, heart hammering so loud I barely heard the applause. Chloe reached the stage steps and yelled, "You didn't finish the puzzle!" Juliet dropped to her knees right there in front of everyone, arms open. Chloe launched into them. Cameras went wild. Juliet held my daughter like she'd been waiting weeks to breathe again. I climbed the 3 steps. The room quieted, sensing something bigger than a photo op. Juliet looked up at me, eyes shining, lips trembling. I opened the small wooden box. "I don't have a speech," I said, loud enough for the microphone to catch. "I'm just a guy who drives cars and raises a kid and learned 2 weeks ago that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stop running." I held out the ring. Simple. Handmade. Imperfect. "We don't need fancy," I told her. "We just need to stop running." She stared at it, then at me, then at Chloe, who was grinning like she'd planned the whole thing. Juliet took the ring with shaking fingers and slid it on. The room exploded again, but I didn't hear it. All I heard was her whispering "yes" against my shoulder as Chloe wrapped her arms around both our necks, and the 3 of us stood there under bright lights that, for once, weren't trying to chase anyone away. Later, when the cameras finally left and the auditorium emptied, we walked out to the schoolyard where the late afternoon sun painted everything gold. Chloe ran ahead to the swings. Juliet slipped her hand into mine. "So," she said, voice steady now, "where do we go from here?" I looked at my daughter laughing on the swing, at the woman beside me wearing beach grass ring like it was worth $1 million, and I knew exactly where. "Home," I said. "We go home." 2 weeks had passed, but the house still carried her absence like a bruise. Chloe finished the frozen puzzle alone and placed it on the shelf without a word. I drove nights again, kept the radio off, let the city blur past the windshield. We didn't talk about her. We didn't have to. Then the invitation appeared on my phone, slipped into my calendar by someone who still had my password. Juliet Monroe Foundation launch, 4 Noanapan Wam. Akenkoins, 118 Brooklyn. I stared at it until the screen went dark. Chloe came home early that Friday. She took one look at my face and knew. "We're going, right?" "Yeah, kiddo, we're going." We parked 3 blocks away to avoid the cameras. The old schoolyard had been transformed. Fresh paint, new playground, banners that read skills, strength, second chances. Women of every age filled the folding chairs. Juliet stood on the low stage in jeans and a simple white shirt, no blazer, no armor, just Juliet. She was mid-sentence when she saw us. Her voice caught. The microphone squealed. For one heartbeat, the entire room held its breath. Then Chloe broke free, sprinted down the aisle, and launched herself at Juliet's legs. "You left the puzzle!" my daughter shouted, loud enough for every reporter to hear. Juliet dropped to her knees, arms around Chloe so tight neither of them moved. Cameras flashed like lightning. I walked slower, the small wooden box heavy in my pocket. When I reached the stage, Juliet looked up, tears already falling. Chloe stepped back, suddenly serious, and gave me the nod she reserves for the most important moments of her life. I opened the box. Inside was a ring, nothing store-bought, just braided sailing rope, a strand of Chloe's hair, and a piece of dried beach grass from our porch jar. Simple. Honest, ours. I didn't kneel, didn't need to. "I'm not good with speeches," I said into the sudden quiet. "But I'm done letting the people I love walk away without knowing they're loved." I held out the ring. Juliet's hand shook as she took it, slid it on, and looked at me like the answer had always been yes. Chloe grabbed the microphone from the stand, stood on tiptoes, and announced to the entire room, "She said yes." The place erupted. Cameras, cheers, strangers crying. Juliet laughed through her tears, pulled Chloe close, then reached for me. I took her hand, felt the rough cord against my palm, and knew every mile we'd run had led right here. Later, when the crowd thinned and the sun dropped low behind the swings, the 3 of us stood in the schoolyard. Chloe ran circles around us, shouting that we were officially a family now. Juliet leaned her head against my shoulder. "Home?" she asked. I looked at the woman wearing beach grass like it was diamonds, at my daughter spinning under the first stars, and answered the only way I could. "We already are."